I'm excited. I didn't run you all off last week. So you all came back after last week. And so we're going through Ephesians. I preached on reproving darkness. And I'm thankful you all put up with me. I sure love you all. I'm so thankful for you. Pray for you all the time. And we have a little bit cooler weather.
Amen.
So it's a little bit cooling down, a little bit nice, and a little bit nicer out there. But I'm so thankful for each of you. We had a special treat today. One of our missionaries who we've supported at Victory a long time. And that is going to be speaking. He's going to be speaking in a minute. And he's got a video to show you also about his ministry. One of the things to me that's always exciting about having a missionary that you've been investing in down through the years is you get to hear just a little bit of how God has blessed what you've invested in that ministry. And so you get to see a little bit of that part of it. Now, you're really not going to see the total benefits till you get to heaven. When you get to heaven, that's where you see what God has done and how he's multiplied it over and over and over again. But you know, if you've been here very long at all, that I believe missions is vitally important for us. We do our part to reach our city with the gospel, and then we invest in the lives of missionaries to go where we cannot go, so that they can reach people there with the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so it's exciting to have one of our own missionaries back with us and that. And I also get excited because I've never met him before. And so getting to hear him and hear about his ministry and hear some of the different ones that we've been able to, that the church has taken on. And then I get to see that and excited about how God's working. So I'm going to ask Brother Bruce Martin to come. He's going to be preaching. He'll let you know more about his ministry. He's also going to be preaching tonight. So I want to encourage you to be back at 5 o'clock tonight. If you're able to be back tonight, plan to come back at 5 o'clock. Thanks, sir.
Pastor, thank you so much. Appreciate that. Well, good morning. It is my pleasure to be back here at Victory Baptist. I was looking and trying to think back about, well, it's been quite a while since I was here. I think it was about 10 years ago. I was here at a missions conference, I think, the last time I was here with y'all. We had a wonderful time. And actually, this church has been supporting me probably for about 40 years. It's been a very long time that this church has had a part in my ministry. My name, like I say, is Bruce Martin. I'm the second generation missionary. My father, Milton Martin, moved to Mexico in 1961. I was 4 years old at the time. So I grew up in Mexico and learned my Spanish, what we call native Spanish, because I learned it as a child. And then the Lord allowed me to get saved at the age of 8. And under my father's ministry there in Mexico City. Then later on, at the age of 12, I felt God's call upon my life to serve him, and that's been my goal ever since. So I can say that that's all I've really known. Actually, I have a wonderful legacy. My great-grandfather was a pastor here in Texas. I was born down in Temple, Texas, so I can say I'm truly a Texan in that area, even though I grew up in a foreign country. And then my grandfather, he never was a pastor, but he was a lay preacher. My father, he passed away in 2020. Right before the COVID started, and then I am now the 4th generation, and I have a son who's a missionary in Argentina. He's the 5th generation of our family to be in the ministry. So we have a wonderful legacy. You don't see that too often, and I'm very thankful to see that God has done that in my family. I got married to my wife, Provianne, and she was with me here last time, and I want to apologize that she's not with me today. We were planning on it, but I have a daughter who lives in Brock, the other side of Weatherford, and she had a kind of emergency trip she had to make, and so my wife is helping take care of the children, of her 2 granddaughters, while she's making her trip. So had to make a change of plans there. But the Lord has blessed us with 3 children. My wife and I met in college. She grew up in Venezuela, not as a missionary daughter. Her father worked for Exxon, the oil company, and her mother is Puerto Rican. She was born in Puerto Rico, and so she also spoke Spanish from the time she was born, just about. And she even has a master's degree in Spanish. She does a lot of teaching in Spanish. So both her and I are bilingual. But we got married in 1979. And in 1980, Metropolitan Baptist Church of Fort Worth commissioned us to be missionaries out of that church. And we've been with them now for 44 years, almost 45. And it's been a wonderful privilege to have them as our sponsoring church. Last year, they celebrated 100 years as a church there in Fort Worth. And so, like I say, we're old-timers in a lot of ways. I just last month celebrated 68 years of life, and I thank the Lord for that. We have 3 children. Our oldest daughter, like I said, lives over here in Brock. Our son lives in Argentina, and our next son, and then our youngest son lives in Houston. So we're Texans at heart all the way in a lot of ways. But I have had the privilege of working in many countries. Right when we started out, we first went to Mexico to work with my father for 5 years. And I helped with several ministries there in Mexico, but especially the print shop that we had there. Then in 1987, God allowed us to move to the country of Honduras, Central America. And we worked there for 17 years until 2004. And then in 2004, God had opened the door for me to start more of an international ministry throughout all of Latin America. At that time, we were starting to visit Cuba quite a bit. I was going to a lot of other countries. In fact, even before we left Honduras, so many doors were opening that I was traveling to teach pastors throughout all Latin America, and it was getting to be a problem to work from Honduras. My wife couldn't stay there by herself because of the dangers. We were broken into several times. Even while we were sleeping, we were robbed. Our neighbors were murdered. We had a lot of problems with crime there, so we decided to locate our home here in the States while I still working. I'm on the road at least 60% of the time. I probably traveled 100,000 miles on air last year, visiting different parts of the world. But God has now allowed me to work as far as specializing in training of pastors, taking ministries that are already somewhat mature and giving them a little bit more, helping them to advance in those areas. And I go to at least 15 different countries in Latin America every year. This year I've already been to Colombia, I've been to Mexico, I have been traveling to other areas here in the States even to do some teaching to Hispanic pastors and things like that. In Sunday school I was reporting about some of the things we're still doing in Mexico. My father, even though he has passed away, the ministries in Mexico are still going very strong. In fact, there's about 200 churches that were a result of my father's ministry in Mexico in about 5 different Indian tribes. So I make a trip to visit them at least 4 or 5 times a year. I was there about a month and a half ago. We organized a new church that had just been started. They asked me to come do for that, a dedicated new church building. Visited some other areas just south of Cancun where they've moved to, started new churches there too. So I do a lot of that now. And that, to me, is a great blessing. But I have a video I'd like to show you. Now, when I made this video, I didn't really put any voice over it, so I'll kind of describe what's going on. But it describes some things that we did in Honduras and also some of the things we're doing today. So if you could start that for me, I'd appreciate it, as we'll be watching some of the things that we're seeing here. Like I said, I moved to Honduras in 1987. And Honduras is a truly banana republic, because that's its biggest industry is bananas. They export a lot of bananas around the world. And it's a poor country, it runs about 4 or 5 million, right in the middle of everything. But we use a lot of different ways of doing ministry. One of those is using film showings in a village or something like that. As you see here, we're going into a new village and starting a ministry there. And one of the things we'll do is show a film, something like that, to bring in a crowd, have like a church service, have an invitation afterward, things like that. Then, of course, one of the things that I'm very strong on is indigenous missions. I've never pastored a church. The churches we started are from the men that I've trained, and they have started the churches. And that allows for a multiplication factor. So here you can see all the different congregations in Honduras that have been started with their pastors as they're teaching and preaching throughout different areas. And God has been blessing in a lot of these places. In fact, I was just here last year to dedicate a new church building. This is their first one they had with just 10 walls, but now they have a regular good church building. And so you can see that man right there next to not the guitar man, but the next to him. He's a pastor there in Sabaneta. And the reason I want to show all these things is that you see that God is still using native men to be preachers and training them to do that. Now, this is in the capital, Tegucigalpa. We had a group from the States that were doing a singing group that was here in this church. This was already established when I got there, but the pastor and I became very strong friends, and he helped me a lot with the training of other men. In fact, right now, he and I were still working over the internet, doing a lot of training in Spanish for pastors and stuff like that, Brother Hernando Ramirez. But you can see the church that he pastors there in the capital. Getting around Honduras is kind of a rough. The roads aren't the best. You have to use 4-wheel drive everywhere, even to this day. And if you don't have the right equipment, and a lot of people don't understand sometimes, that the biggest budget that a missionary has sometimes is just transportation expenses. Because vehicles there can be 2 to 3 times what they cost here. And then the gasoline can be $6 or $7 a gallon. And then you've got the roads like this that you don't get good mileage on a road like this, I guarantee you. If you get 3 or 4 miles per gallon, you're doing real good. But this is what we have to go through. And thank the Lord for the churches that provide us with good equipment to work with, to get where we need to get to, and that's part of what you have to do. And so we are very grateful that God continues to bless us in a lot of these areas. Honduras is really way behind other countries. Like, I'm used to Mexico now. The roads are a lot better there. I don't need a four-wheel drive in Mexico. But there in Honduras is still very much like this in those areas. Here we see one of the classes we're having with preachers. It's nothing fancy. You don't really have a fancy schoolroom like we would here, or sometimes even things like that. But this is one of the pastor I was telling you about in the capital. And this is my son many years ago when he was teaching. He is now in Argentina, working as a missionary out of our church. But this is how he got started when he was still very young. Then in a moment I want to show you also a video of Mexico. This is another part of Honduras still, San Juancito. And I just want to show you all the different areas that we started congregations and the way the Lord blessed us in those areas. But in Mexico, like I said, things have grown. One of the things that the greatest pleasures a pastor has, or missionary, is baptizing. In fact, I just had the privilege of doing that in Mexico 4.5 weeks ago. The pastor that was supposed to do it got sick. He had to go to the hospital. And so the church says, well, can you do it for us? And so it was my joy to do that also in a river like this. They don't have baptistries in most of those places, so you have to do it in a river. And to get there, if you go to baptistry service in some of these places, the way you get there is you have to walk along the river, and it's not that easy to get there. So you have to be really dedicated if you want to be involved. It's not as easy as we just have our comfortable seats, and we have to walk like that to get to the baptistry service. This is in Mexico. This was in 2017. This is the third building in one of the churches that my father helped start there, and we're having the dedication. They worked about 8 or 9 years to build this building. The young man on the left there is the pastor, Brother Alejandro, and we are cutting the ribbon to open up the building for the first time. And the reason I want to show you this video is I want to show you the size of this building. Now, they built the building entirely themselves, without a penny from the U.S. No U.S. offerings were used for this. They did it. They did all the work themselves somewhat. It took them a long time. You have to be patient sometimes when you have to do it on your own. They don't have loans or mortgages there that they can get. They have to pay as they go. So it might take 10 years to build this new building. They had another one on the side. That's now their Sunday school and dining area when they have conferences. But this is one of the largest churches we have there. Attendance is about 500. And during this conference, we had about 1,200 people to come and participate. We had a pastor from the U.S., Brother Mark Thrift there. On the right, the guy with the bald head, of course. Americans, you don't hardly ever see Indians with bald heads. But anyway, we're opening up the doors now and going in. And the reason I wanted to show you this video is to show you the size of this church and what they did. They built the benches themselves. This is in the jungle, southern jungle of Mexico, not too far from the Guatemalan border. And they have, believe it or not, mahogany that they can use for wood. So they built all of their benches out of mahogany. You see the size of the church there. And it's a pretty large congregation. Of course, for the event, they brought in a lot of other people to celebrate with them. And then this is another event where the man on the right there's getting ordained. And so this is in the city of San Cristóbal de las Casas. And look how many people come for an event like this. This is a very common thing. God is doing a lot in Mexico. And in a moment, I'm going to explain why God is doing that. But we're really happy to see how that Latin America, in some ways, might be taking over the torch for America, for the United States. We're seeing churches in our country not doing what they're doing before. And so my question is, well, if we don't have the torch, who gets it? And it's very possible, and we're starting to see some things like that, because I'm really excited. This is my pastor, Brother Larry Atkinson. He's now with the Lord. But he came down to Honduras for this event when of course, I was much younger then, as you can see, and much lighter. But this is one of the churches that we had there in San Juancito, and this is the organization. We don't organize right when we start meeting. We wait until they've been at least 5-6 years, until they're totally self-sufficient. They've got their own building, they've got their own pastor, before we organize the church. And so that's why we do that. What they do here is they have the church covenant, and each one of the charter members is signing the church covenant as they start this new church. I just had the privilege of doing the very same thing about 4.5 weeks ago there in Mexico, like we're doing this right here. This is a very common way of doing things. And so I'm very pleased to see how God is opening up a lot of congregations and churches throughout Latin America. And it's not that I'm doing it. It's God that's doing it. Give him the glory. But also, it's the men that he's called. Because that's the key. And with those leaders, there can be a lot happen. Now, I've been talking about what's happening in Mexico. One of the most exciting things that's happened in the last 3 years is that, and this was something that my father was very concerned about. He was trying to do a lot of teaching on the subject before he passed away. I was doing the same thing. Is we had a lot of these churches, over about 200, but they really weren't doing missions like we wanted to. Now, it wasn't that they weren't involved. They were reaching out in their own areas and witnessing and starting new churches. They were giving to missions quite a bit, things like that, but they weren't sending missionaries. And that was really concerning to us. Well, that's changed. 2 years ago, I took 2 men from these churches in Mexico to the country of Nepal. Well, actually, it was 4 of us on a survey trip. After a month there, we returned, and 2 of them stayed behind. They were single, and they said, nope, we feel that this is where God has called us, and they've been working there now for 2 years. Next month, I will be going to Zimbabwe with 2 men. The young man that you just saw, that big church that we just inaugurated, the building, he and one of his young men in his church just finished Bible school, and he feels called to the country of Zimbabwe. And we're doing a survey trip with the Mexican men to Zimbabwe. Now, you have to understand, these people have never gotten on a plane in their lives. Some of them have never even gone to their capital city. And now they're going to the other side of the world. So they kind of need someone to go with them to explain how to do things when they're getting there. So that's been one of the jobs that I've been doing lately, is helping. In fact, I was last year, took a group of men to Ecuador. We've been to Colombia. We're getting to see a lot of different men in Mexico surrendering to the mission field from Mexico. And they're not getting any support from the states. The churches in Mexico are supporting them. They can do it for a lot cheaper than American can. They can live in conditions sometimes. In fact, when I was in Nepal with those 2 men there, I went back after they'd been there about a year to check on them, to see how they were doing. And they looked so much like the Nepalese that they fit right in. In fact, the Nepalese thought they were Nepalese, and they would get offended if they wouldn't talk to them because they didn't know the language. And it's a very difficult language to learn. It's very much like Hindi. It's a very Hindu country and difficult country. It's a closed country. They had to go in as students. They were not allowed to go in as missionaries. And that's the same thing as will be with Zimbabwe and these other countries. So I'm really excited to see what God is doing. And I appreciate that what y'all are doing to help us do these kind of things. This trip to Zimbabwe was pretty expensive. I'm paying for only my costs. They are paying for theirs. But they raise the funds. It's their project, not mine. I'm just going along to help, but I will pay my way on a trip like this. So I appreciate y'all being able to provide that's the type of support so we can do these kind of things. And I can go on, and I do a lot of stuff in Cuba. In fact, 2 weeks from today, I'll be traveling to Cuba and visiting some things there. But I'll talk about that tonight. So if you come back tonight, we'll tell you all about what goes on in Cuba, okay? Let's open our Bibles to 2 Kings chapter 6. 2 Kings chapter 6. Here we find that at the time, this chapter deals especially with the northern nation of Israel. If you remember, after Solomon died, Israel was divided into 2 parts. The southern part was called Judah, and the northern 10 tribes we called Israel. And of course, their capital was not in Jerusalem. The northern kingdom had its capital in Samaria. And since the northern kingdom was bordered with Syria, they were having a lot of battles with Syria. Syria was a big enemy, and it is to this day, has never changed. And so therefore, they were having a lot of battles with the king of Syria at that time named Ben-Hadad. And here we find that Elisha is now the prophet. Elijah has died, and Elisha has taken over. And as the battles are going on and Syria was attacking, God used Elisha to provide the king of Israel with information about where and when and what was going to be going on with the Syrian army when they wanted to attack. So the king of Syria, Ben-Hadad, began to wonder, what's going on here? Why is it every time I have a plan, the king of Israel knows what's going on? I can't surprise him. So he began to suspect that there was a spy in his palace, in his court, and his servant says, no, that's not what's happening. What's happening is they have a prophet, and that prophet Elisha tells them everything that's going on. In fact, they said they even tell what's going on in your bedroom. So the king of Syria, Ben-Hadad, said, okay, let's get this guy. Where does he live? He said, well, he lives in Dothan. So he sent an army, a group of soldiers, to capture Elisha. We're going to start reading about that in verse 13. 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 13. And he said, go and spy where he is, that I may send and fetch him. And it was told him, saying, behold, he is in Dothan. Therefore sent he hither horses and chariots and a great host, and they came by night and compassed the city about. And when the servant of the man of God was risen early and gone forth, behold, an host compassed the city both with horses and chariots. And his servant said unto him, alas, my master, how shall we do? And he answered, fear not, for they that be with us are more than they that be with them. And Elisha prayed and said, Lord, I pray thee, open his eyes, that he may see. And the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire round about Elisha. And when they came down to him, Elisha prayed unto the Lord, and said, smite these people, I pray thee, with blindness. And he smote them with blindness, according to the word of Elisha. And Elisha said unto them, this is not the way, neither is this the city. Follow me, and I will bring you to the man whom ye seek. But he led them to Samaria. And it came to pass, when they were come into Samaria, that Elisha said, Lord, open the eyes of these men, that they may see. And the Lord opened their eyes, and they saw, and behold, they were in the midst of Samaria. And the king of Israel said unto Elisha, when he saw them, my father, shall I smite them? Shall I smite them? And he answered, thou shalt not smite them. Wouldest thou smite those whom thou hast taken captive with thy sword and with thy bow? Set bread and water before them, that they may eat and drink, and go to their master. And he prepared a great provision for them. And when they had eaten and drunk, he sent them away. And they went to their master, so that the bands of Syria came no more into the land of Israel. Let's pray. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for your word. We pray that as we've read it and studied it, that you might open our eyes to see what great things you have for us even this morning. Father, the Holy Spirit is among us. I pray that the Holy Spirit might have freedom to touch each one of our hearts. May we give permission to you, Father, to do a work in us, because that's what we desire this morning. For we pray it in Jesus' name. Amen. Now, this story to me is a very interesting story. We find, of course, that the fact that the servant that Elisha had was now a different servant than the one he had the chapter before. In the chapter before, we had the story of Naaman, the leper. And the problem was at the very end of the story, when he tried to give a reward and give Elisha a payment, so to speak, or not just a payment, but he wanted to reward him with money and other things, valuables, Elisha refused it. But what happened was, after he left, the servant chased after him and after Naaman and said, my master's changed his mind, he wants it now. Which was a lie. And he got that all that gold and silver from Naaman. And when Elisha found out about it, he says, okay, the leper that Naaman had, now you will have it. So he lost that servant. So this is a new servant. It's an interesting young man. We don't know what his name is. But it says he got up very early in the morning. That tells me a lot. Because someone who gets up in the morning is a disciplined person. He's not a lazy person. He's serving his master well. He's getting things ready for the day. And as he goes out, he finds out that Dothan is surrounded by this enemy, by the Syrian army. Now, Dothan's a little village. It doesn't have any walls. It doesn't have any protection like Samaria does or Jerusalem or these other ones. And so therefore, they have no way of defending themselves. In fact, they don't even have an army there. They have no one that's able to even fight against this great army that's come. So of course, his idea was, his thinking of this servant was, we're goners. There's no hope for us. And he was full of fear. And the reason I want to take some time and look at this is we're going through a lot, especially in the last 4 or 5 years here in our country. We've had a pandemic, and there's been a lot of fear during the pandemic. There's no denying of that, is there? At the very beginning, we weren't sure how bad it was, but then the government didn't help by making us more fearful, and their desires that we be fearful so they could control us. And it goes on, and we're seeing now today, well, maybe we're not worried about the pandemic, but we got politics that are in the mix, and we're worried about what's going to happen there. And if we don't be careful, we can be just like this young man saying, what are we going to do? We don't have any chance. This is the worst we've ever seen it. If we don't get the candidate we want, man, the country's going to be lost, and we can go on and let's step back for a minute and really think. Who's really in charge? And really, if you'll study this passage, you find it has a lot to do with sight. That's what it's really about. The sight of this servant. The sight of the Syrian army. In fact, Elisha prayed 3 times in this passage. And the 3 times that he prayed, it had to do with vision, with seeing. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit this morning. What do we really see? Now, we have 5 senses, right? And those 5 senses are very important to us. It's how we get all our information. In fact, when God wants to reveal himself to us, he has to use some of those senses. That's why he gave us the Word of God. We can hear it, we can read it. That's how we know what God is. Because God used this for us to know about him, but we have to use our senses. Remember Moses on Mount Sinai wanted to see God. But he said, your senses cannot handle it. You'll die if I show you the way I really am. But you realize that our senses are not that reliable. Our senses can fool us. And one of the senses we think are the most accurate and the most dependable is sight. We'll say, well, if I don't see it, I don't believe it. We use sight as the sure thing. But do you realize that even our sight can betray us? There's a lot of things about our eye that God designed it in a very unique way. I studied this quite a bit when I was in college. I went to Bob Jones University, but my degree, my study was not in Bible. I studied cinematography, how to make films. I worked with cameras a lot. I worked on a film for 3 years called Sheffy. And so therefore, I know a lot about what it is with the sight, because that's what we were doing. We're recording film, and today with video and everything, you've got this all up here. We're using sight a lot, but I also learned how I could fool you. I can make you think you saw something when you really didn't see it. Your mind puts 2 and 2 together and said, okay, 2 and 2 is 4, so I saw 4. No, you saw a 2 and a 2. You never saw 4. But there's another thing about the design of our eye that's really unique. Our eye has, in fact, almost all cameras are just a copy of our eye. We never really figured that out. It's God who made this design. We just copied God's design. And therefore, we have the lens in front, the light goes in, and of course we have an eyeball. The back of our eyeball is a retina. That's what receives the light. That's what takes that light and changes it into the impulses that go to our brain. But it's not a point. It covers most of the back of the eye, our retina. Because our eye is a ball, that retina is not flat. It's curved. In fact, we call it a parabola, right? There's like a satellite antenna. And that's a very unique design. Why? Well, the reason that a satellite antenna is parabolic is because it takes a very, very weak signal and concentrates it into one spot. That's what it does. It takes all that signal coming down from the satellite and pushes it into one little spot there, and that's what our eye does in a way. But there's a very basic problem with the parabola. The very center doesn't work. In other words, there's a blind spot. Now, God did something very interesting. He did not make our eye perfectly parabolic. In fact, he made it a little crooked. And the reason for that is the blind spot is not in the middle, it's off to our side. Now you might think, well, when I don't see a black spot. Well, that's because you have two eyes. And the other eye fills in. But the scientists have done this study very carefully. They've taken subjects and covered up the one eye, put them in front of a bank of lights, and they'll turn on these lights one at a time. And ask the subject, do you see it? Do you see it? And they'll turn on the light where the blind spot is, and the person won't see it. Now, he sees something, but he doesn't see the light come on. Because what's happening is the mind is filling in what the eye does not see. You realize that? Your mind fills it in. In fact, they've done a lot of studies with this. They took a subject one time and took a special set of lenses, put it on his face, and it turned everything upside down. And they say, walk around that way for a while. Can you mind walking around seeing everything upside down? They wanted to see what was going to happen to him mentally. You know what happened after 2 days? His mind flipped the image. And he started to see everything normally. When they took off the lenses, everything was upside down. And his mind had to go through another 2-3 days of flipping it back. What does that tell you? Your mind changes what you see. So you think you're seeing something, but your mind fills in. That's why a lot of times you'll go to an accident scene, and the police will ask all these witnesses, and no one really has the same story sometimes. Because actually they think they saw something, but their mind filled it in. So if that happens that way, it means we can't trust our sight. You know, there's a lot of things in our life that we try to trust, but you can't really do it because God gives us something that's much more trustworthy. That's why we have this book. It's something outside of ourselves that tells us what the truth is. Because you think that you know the truth through your senses, and your senses can fool you. And here we find this young man thought he knew what was going on. He thought he was seeing reality, but he wasn't. And what did Elisha pray? Lord, open his eyes. There's another sense that he needed to use. It wasn't a physical sense, it was a spiritual sense. Because this army that was around Elisha protecting him were angels, and they were not physical, they were spiritual. Because angels are spirits. Our God is a spirit. That's why we must worship in spirit and truth. The way we worship God is with our soul. Because we can't see him, but by faith we know he is there. And one of the things that we praise, God give us spiritual sight. That's the biggest thing that I pray for. God, show me what you want me to see. Not what this world wants us to see. And of course, now that we use visuals so much, we'll watch TV, we'll watch all these other sources that we have. Now we're getting in our devices and streaming and all these other, and we all are getting our information from many sources, and it's visual information. And we think we're seeing the truth, but they can fool us. It's not always real. So we have to go forward and say, God, and actually do the same prayer that Elisha did, show me what you want me to see. Not what the world wants me to see, not what the devil wants me to see, because the devil doesn't want to fool us. Let me see through your eyes, Lord, not through my eyes, because I can't trust my eyes. I can't trust my feelings. And that's a big thing today. A lot of people think that, well, if the feelings are my biggest guide to know what the truth is. That's the biggest fallacy there is. Feelings, and we see this not just in our secular world, and it's getting more and more in our secular world because people are using this in the gender movement, everything else. It's feelings, but it's also in churches. How many times have I gone to a situation and I am in an argument or just debating someone? For instance, in Latin America, it's a big thing about, well, does God allow women to be pastors? Well, the scripture says it very clearly. And I've heard me say, I know what the scripture says, but I know what I felt. And I felt God's call upon my life. God will never go against scripture if it's him. And you know, the Bible says the devil will be presented as an angel of light. And if we follow what we feel, our emotions, we will get fooled. I don't care what they say. They say, well, I had this vision. I had this calling. God came to me. If it doesn't go along with this word, I can't believe it. I only believe what this word says. One of my desires when I was a young man was to be a missionary pilot. My father had an airplane. He used it there in Mexico quite a bit. I started flying. For my 12th birthday, my father gave me a flight lesson. I started flying very early. When I was in college, I took all the flight lessons I could. One of the things I learned when I was being a student in flight as I further along, after I got my private pilot's license and moved on, I wanted to get instrument rated. And one of the things that they taught me about instrument rating is don't trust your senses. If you trust your senses, you're going to get killed. What happens is when you're flying an airplane and you lose outside visual reference, and you're in the clouds, and you can't see anything outside, you start thinking, well, I'm going to do it according to what I feel. How's if the plane's moving around, I'm going to... And the thing is, inside of our inner ear, we have 3 circular tubes that are what tells us how we feel motion. The problem is, those senses can be fooled very easily. You remember John F. K's son who was killed in an airplane crash? He was flying. This is what happened to him. He was not instrument rated. He got in the clouds, and he started flying according to what he felt. And everyone who does this is what will happen. You'll slowly start moving to the left and down, thinking that you're flying straight. In other words, your feelings say, oh, you're moving to the right, so you correct and move to the left. And you're going down, and eventually you crash because you're using... What do they teach us as an instrument pilot? Don't trust what you feel, trust your instruments. Your instruments are given to you to tell you what the true situation is. We have instruments. God gave us instruments to follow. We don't follow what we feel. We follow what God tells us what is real. That's the true reality. And I don't care what the world says is reality. They do not see it like we see it. Because God gave us this book to see through his eyes. And that's how we do it. That's why we trust this book. That's why we follow this book. But here's another thing, though. Elisha didn't just pray that his servant's eyes be opened. He had a second prayer. He prayed that these soldiers' eyes would be closed, that they would be blinded. Interesting. Are there times when God needs to blind people? Yes. These were the enemies of Elisha and of God and of God's people. And they'd come to do great harm. So sometimes God needs to blind them. Over the years, I've seen this happen many times. I've traveled to about 60, 70 different countries. I've taken literature to Cuba, Bibles. I've smuggled them to many other places. In Argentina, some years back, we were trying to get in a big load of literature, and the government was giving us a lot of trouble. I know that I'll be going to a country like Zimbabwe here next month, and that's a kind of a closed country. You got to be very careful and sometimes you are carrying things that are necessary, that will be a help to the believers, other things like that, and you say, Lord, blind the eyes of the officials. And I've seen God do it. God can do it. God is powerful. And even though they'll open up the suitcase and see it right there, and they just act like they don't see it. It's happened. Because, like I said, you think you think you know what you're seeing, but you never know. Sometimes it's a bad thing. Sometimes it's a good thing. When we're serving the Lord. And this was what God used to protect Elisha from the enemy. But then he didn't stop there. He prayed a third time. And the third time he prayed, he says, now open their eyes. But that time, he was doing it out of mercy. Remember, the king of Israel wanted to kill him right there? But when they opened their eyes, they thought, okay, now we see our true predicament. Because he'd brought them to Samaria, where there was an army, where there was walls, they were inside the walls, they had no escape, and it was basically, they were done for. Now, the table has, the coin has flipped. What the servant thought that was a sure thing that he was going to die, now these soldiers are saying, we're going to die. It passed on to them. And so the king of Israel said, Elisha, can I kill him? I says, no, you can't kill him. In fact, what you're going to do is you're going to treat him nice. You're going to feed him. You're going to take care of them. You're going to send them on their way. Let's look at this, step back and look at this whole thing. Was it a great victory? Did God's people win? Did Elisha win? How many people were killed? Not a single one, but it was a great victory. Here's a battle in a way, but a battle without any casualties. But God is glorified. You know, our nation, its military, has what they call PSYOPs, psychological operations. If you study war and study what is involved in being in the military, the biggest way that you could defeat another army isn't with sometimes their size or anything else. It's psychological. Gideon knew this. Gideon's victory was not because they were more powerful. It was because they psychologically defeated their enemy. Right now we're talking about what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. Everyone thought, well, Russia's going to defeat them. But the problem was Russia had some psychological problems. And Ukraine used that to their advantage. And they have not, what we expected did not happen. It's the same thing today. We're not in a battle against flesh and blood. Our battle is spiritual. And the casualties are not physical, they're spiritual. And it's very sad. But when God has the victory, he doesn't destroy his victory, he saves his enemy. Amen. He gives them life. What a wonderful business we're in. What a wonderful thing to be involved around the world. To people who are our enemies of our nation. And to be able to take the gospel to them. And instead of being our enemies, they become our friends. But God has to do it. Because the only one that can change a heart is God. The greatest miracle that you'll ever see. We can talk about all the miracles. The parting of the Red Sea. There's so many miracles in Scripture that has to do with healing. But you know what? The biggest thing that God can do is when he takes the heart of a man that's hard, that refuses to know him, and he changes that heart. Because I can't do it. You can't. No other human being can do it. Only God can change a heart. And when you see that happen, you've just witnessed a great miracle. Let's recognize it for what it is. And let's give our God the glory. And let's pray, God, open my eyes to see things the way they really are, not the way this world wants to. Father, we thank you so much.